Good. There are a number of common elements in making a pastoral call, which we've talked about, and one of them is learning how to say hello and sometimes learning how to say goodbye. So perhaps we could take a moment or two and talk about ways in which you make a greeting when you arrive to visit with someone and knock on the door, and then the door opens and there you are.
Well, depending if you're there with the Eucharist, certainly you want to introduce yourself, who you are, and that you have brought communion to share together. You brought a Sunday bulletin. I would put this visit within the context of the life of the church. That depending upon the person, and some people are not well, so a short visit is much preferable, but you might want to discuss that it's the season of the year, what the theme of the day was. You might want to say something about the sermon. That's assuming you paid attention on Sunday. But something that includes the person you've come to see within the life of the church.
Very good.
For instance, this Sunday you'd probably want to mention the carols and lessons that is happening this Sunday, especially if you're doing it before that service, so people would know, or even afterwards you could say how wonderful it was.
To know what events have been happening, and in today's technological age in which we're using more and more of this type of setting, the ways and many places in which the life of the church appears on the internet too, which they can access. So that's something else to think about. How do you say goodbye? I mean, one of the things we talk about is when the service is done, which we're going to be again mentioning how we lay out the order of service and the receiving communion, and that in the next video. But when that's done, and that's usually the end of your time together, it's a very nice sort of a crescendo to build to the liturgy. And when the liturgy is over, sometimes people have needs and may want to talk even more, but it's a good idea to try to let that be the end of the service, sort of the bookend of your service. If opening the door and saying hello is the beginning, and the communion is sort of the crescendo, the dismissal, the closing prayer of that communion is the last bookend of your visit. But how would you go about making that be the end of the visit so that everyone can move forward into the next thing they're doing that day? Challenge.
Yes.
We've all been there.
Well, one of the things would be expectation. Many people, if the focus of the visit is the Eucharist and the time together, then when we get to the end and we have blessed the Lord, then I would begin to clean up the table. People who have been able to come to be part of the faith community here, that signals the time is coming to a close. And so I would clean it up and put it into my communion kit and express pleasure at having been able to spend this time together with the person, and say if it was convenient for them, someone would call and set up a visit at the first of the following month.
Very good.
So that there was an expectation that I would come again. And I would do that even for someone perhaps who was not well enough to remember that we would come. The more those things can be reinforced, the better. Another thing that happens is that for many people who are older and perhaps not able to get out into the world, all the days look the same. And so it is important to help someone remember that I come to see you on the first Wednesday of the month, or someone else will come next month, since different Eucharistic visitors come each time.
Right, another important distinction between that and And the
Absolutely.
lay Eucharistic ministers, as the Stephen ministers are building through continuity, much more of a relationship.
A relationship with a specific person, whereas the Eucharistic visitor is a relationship with the wider body of the church. So a different person comes each month because we are a wide, diverse body of Christ.
Yes, absolutely. Well said, thank you.
A lay Eucharistic minister might have sensed from a conversation, something the individual has said, or an expression of concern, that there is something else that this person needs. That would be a very good note for pastoral conduct or contact, as Paul said, because a Stephen minister perhaps should be involved with someone who is expressing grave concerns, sorrow, life-ending issues. There are so many different things that they would not have the opportunity to discuss with the lay Eucharistic minister at any length, that perhaps they do need someone who will discuss it with them at length.
Thank you.
Also, from my past experiences, one example I used before we started taping was delivering Meals on Wheels, and how some of these people are so hungry for conversation and contact with people that this is probably good to note also for a potential Stephen ministry referral.
Many different kinds of hunger
Yes.
that's being addressed there. Are there any words of encouragement to send out to our new lay Eucharistic ministers?
Well, I'd say thank you to keep people who are not able to actively participate personally, physically in the body of Christ, to keep them connected to the church, and to keep the body of Christ here at St. Mark's connected to those who are separated from us is very valuable. And so thank you for your ministries.
And I think it's important to encourage you. You must realize that being a little nervous, a little afraid when you're first starting out is very common. Our Stephen ministers, when they first have their first care receiver, are very nervous, and you will gain comfort, and I think you will find that it enriches your life. So thank you for your ministry.